This is another in our series of lectures, Illusions, Delusions, and Confusions, about cartographic myths on old maps. A cartographic myth is a geographic feature that appears on a map but not on the Earth, an island where there are but waves, or a city where there is only empty land. This lecture concerns one of the most famous cartographic myths, the appearance for over a century of California shown as an island. Now, this was not a prediction, though it might eventually come true, but rather a mistaken belief based on intrigue, confusion, and wishful thinking. One of the early geographic beliefs about North America was that there was a strait called the Strait of Anian separating the continent from Asia, and that there was also a water route to the north of America by which one could get between the Atlantic and the Pacific. It is interesting that both of these 16th century beliefs were about geographic features which indeed do exist, though those beliefs were not at the time based on any empirical evidence, and what was believed differed significantly from the truth. The supposed Northern Passage and the Strait of Anian can thus be considered geographic myths, though ones that did dimly reflect reality. Still, much of the early exploration in the northern parts of America was in search of the route across the top of the continent. The English attempted to find their Northwest Passage from the direction of the northern Atlantic. The Spanish, who in the 16th century had the Pacific Ocean mostly to themselves, instead searched for the passage by sailing up the west coast of America, looking for an entrance to the Anian Strait, and then into a hoped-for northern passage somewhere along the northern coast of California. One such expedition, searching for the mythical Strait of Anian, ironically led to the creation of another myth, that of California being an island. The earliest maps of America correctly showed California as part of the continent, with a peninsula extending to the south. This configuration was known by Europeans because Francisco de Ulloa had sailed to the northern end of the Bay of California in 1539. However, it was not then clear exactly how far north the Gulf extended. If we look at a detail of North America on this map by John Dee from 1582, we can see that some cartographers believe that the head of the Gulf was located very close to the Pacific. This was just one of the many watery notions some Europeans had about North America, here shown as a veritable Swiss cheese of waterways and land. Still, up through the end of the 16th century, it was generally accepted that California was part of the continent, with a large peninsula on the southern end. So where did the idea that California was an island come from? This myth has a quite convoluted history, which is not clear in all its details. We do know that the myth has its roots in a novel, Las Sergas de Esplandian, written by Garcia Ordóñez de Montalvo at the beginning of the 16th century. The story tells of a mythical island called California, ruled by Queen Calafia and inhabited by a tribe of warrior women. It is thought that when Cortes first landed on Baja California in 1535, he believed he had found an island, and so he named it after the island from the novel. Thus, from the earliest days of the discovery of Baja California, the notion of insularity was connected with it. As we noted, Ulloa had essentially proved California was a peninsula by sailing to the northern end of the bay in 1539. He did not actually reach the land at the very northern end of the bay, but he essentially proved that the Sea of California, as it was called, was a bay and not a strait. To confuse matters, however, a later report by Juan de Oñate, who explored by land as far north as the mouth of the Colorado River in 1604, stated that the Gulf ran on further to the north and west. This seemed to support the notion that the Sea of California might extend further north, closer, or maybe all the way to the Pacific. Thus, the notion of California being an island continued to bubble below the surface in Spanish minds, most relevantly in the mind of one Father Antonio de Ascension. Father Ascension was an assistant cosmographer on the 1602 voyage of Sebastian Vizcaino, who was sent to sail north along the California coast in order to find a safe harbor for Spanish ships returning from the East Indies, as well as to look for the legendary city of Quivira, another cartographic myth, as well as for the hoped-for entrance to the Straits of Anian. In the years following the return of the Vizcaino expedition, Ascension wrote a number of accounts, culminating in his 1620 Relación Breve, based on a diary he kept during the 1602 voyage. In that account, Ascension wrote, quote, "I hold it to be very certain and proven that the whole kingdom of California, discovered on this voyage, is the largest island known, or which has been discovered up to the present day, and that it is separated from the provinces of New Mexico by the Mediterranean Sea of California." This conclusion seems to have been based on the facts that beyond Cape Mendocino, the California coast turned northeast, and one of the ships in the expedition had discovered a large river flowing into the ocean, which the crew thought was a likely candidate for the entrance to the Strait of Anian. These discoveries, Oñate's report, and his own predisposition led Ascension to that bold statement of the insularity of California. Reports by first-hand observers are usually accepted as authoritative, so Ascension's assertion that California was an island became generally accepted by the Spanish, and so was shown on at least a few Spanish maps. The story is told that a Dutch ship captured a Spanish ship which was carrying one such map. At that time, the Spanish had done the most exploring of the Americas, but they notoriously did not share their geographic knowledge with the rest of the world. So other European nations suspected that the Spanish had secret knowledge that they were keeping to themselves. Thus, when a Spanish map appeared showing California as an island, everyone just assumed that the Spanish had known this fact, keeping it secret, and that now the truth had finally been discovered. It has been suggested that it was Jacob Lemaire on his voyage around the world in 1615-1616 who captured the Spanish map. But in any case, the title page of the account of Lemaire's voyage, issued by Michael Collagen in 1622, included one of the first two maps to show California separated from the continent. The other map, also issued by Collagen in 1622, was the title page to Antonio de Herrera's y Tordesillas Historiography of the Americas. Both maps show the separation of California just as a thin line, but now this myth was on the map. Henry Briggs was an English scientist, mathematician, who wrote about California being an island as early as 1622. And the map which accompanied his 1625 account of the search for the Northwest Passage clearly shows this myth, and it includes a note that, quote, "California is sometimes supposed to be part of ye western continent, but since by a Spanish chart taken by ye Highlanders, it is found to be a goodly island." This map was actually preceded by a map by Dutch cartographer Abraham Goos, which first appeared in 1624. However, it is generally thought that Goose based his map either on a manuscript by Briggs or perhaps that there was an earlier edition of the Briggs map, which has since been lost. In any case, it is likely the Briggs map which inspired English mapmaker John Speed to show California as an island on his map of North and South America from the following year. Unlike Briggs, Speed was a professional mapmaker, and consequently his map had a wide distribution and great influence on other mapmakers. After the publication of Speed's map showing California as an island, this myth was accepted by essentially all the major European cartographers, including the biggest Dutch publishers like Henricus Hondius. Even the great French cartographer Nicolas Sanson, who was known for trying to base his maps only on what was documented by first-hand observation, showed California as an island. By shortly after the middle of the 17th century, The island of California was so firmly established in the general understanding of the Americas that it warranted maps focused just on the island. By the end of the century, most maps showing America included this cartographic myth. Still, there were some who continued to think California might actually be attached to the continent. One of these was leading French cartographer Guillaume Delisle, who wrote to a fellow scientist, J. D. Cassini, in 1700 of his doubts about the insularity of California. That same year, Delisle's map of North America left the question open, making it possible to interpret the map either way. Part of Delisle's skepticism came from his reading reports by Jesuits in America. The most important of these was a Father Eusebio Kino, a missionary who arrived in northern Sonora, Mexico in 1681. In talking to local Indians and traveling to near the northern end of the Gulf of California, as well as seeing that the Indians had some blue shells, which were like those Kino had seen when he had previously visited the California coast, the father came to believe that there was a land connection between Sonora and California. That is, that California was not an island. While he himself did not ever complete a land journey to California, his arguments were compelling, and he published a map showing his conclusion in 1705. By 1722, Guillaume Delisle became convinced that Kino was right, and his map of America showed California firmly reattached to the continent. Such was Delisle's reputation that this began to turn the tide against the notion that California was an island. Still, many cartographers continued to believe in the island myth, including influential British cartographer Herman Moll, who wrote, quote, "California is undoubtedly an island. Why, I have had in my offices mariners who have sailed around it." Much of the continuation of the island myth had to do with the general inertia of the map trade, where once something was on the map, it was either easier to keep showing it than to have to modify one's map to keep up with the new evidence. Another Jesuit, Fernando Consag, sailed completely around the northern end of the Gulf of Mexico in 1746. He showed it on his map from the following year, and this should have put the myth to bed. However, such was the power of the myth that the same year the King of Spain, Fernando VII, felt compelled to issue a royal edict proclaiming California is not an island. Explorations in the early 18th century and the King's proclamation did sound the death knell for the myth, though there were still plenty of maps made showing California as an island after 1747, even to as late as the end of the 18th century, though they became fewer and fewer. California as an island is one of the most interesting, graphic, and famous of all cartographic myths, lasting over a century and a half and being shown on hundreds of maps. We hope you enjoyed the story of this myth and found our presentation interesting and informative. Thank you for watching this Philadelphia Print Shop West online lecture. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. If you would like to see a selection of original antique maps, including some with this cartographic myth, please visit our website at pps-west.com.